Okay. Well, my time's up, Chairman. Thank you for the hearing. Thank you to this distinguished panel. And Mr. Wetzel, thank you for your service.
Senator Whitehouse, I'm grateful. I'm told by my staff the order of appearance, and this order will go into Senator Ossoff, Senator Padilla, and no disrespect to the two aforementioned gentlemen, the best for last, Senator Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing us together. Grateful also to Senator Cotton for supporting this hearing, and thank you to our panelists for your expertise and experience. Mrs. White, as you know, Senator Braun, Chair Durbin, and I have introduced bipartisan legislation to overhaul federal prison oversight and strengthen security at federal prisons. And the purpose of this bill is to help identify and address threats to the safety and welfare of both incarcerated people and the thousands of correctional officers and others who work in our federal prisons every day, and that's the Federal Prison Oversight Act. Mrs. White, the Council of Prison Locals, which represents more than 30,000 correctional officers, worked with us to develop this legislation and has endorsed the legislation. Can you speak to the committee about why correctional officers support our bill and what it would mean for your members who are working in federal prisons every day?
Sure. So as you said, we have been in support and we have worked really hard to help get this. We have, for years, the Council of Prison Locals, the union, has gone to bat and asked for additional funding. For years, we thought funding was our only issue. If we could get more money, we could fix the problems. And the union was very successful in doing so, but over the years, we have come to know that funding is not the issue. Sometimes it might be an oversight issue of where the funding is going. So we have been strategic in where we asked for funding the last couple of years. This year, we probably will be a little even more strategic, but as I said in my opening and in the written statement, we welcome any oversight. We need accountability. We need help. The Bureau, I think, is the second largest in DOJ budget, and we're not sure where all of that money is going. And so any oversight from anyone, I think, would be super helpful.
Well, I'm grateful to you and your organization for helping us to develop this legislation and for the advocacy of the correctional officers across the country who are urging Congress to pass it. It's a bipartisan bill aimed at improving oversight within BOP, strengthening the security of federal prisons. It's got strong support from the Council of Prison Locals, strong support from reform advocates, and look forward to working with you to continue to urge it across the finish line here in the Senate and in the House. Mr. Wetzel, you, I believe, are also familiar with the legislation. And based upon your extensive experience working in corrections, what impact do you believe it would have on conditions and safety in federal prisons, both for incarcerated people and staff?
It's essential. I don't see how you make progress in the federal system without knowing. You can't even lay out a data-driven or problem statement because you don't have enough information. The very essence of fixing a problem is being able to define it and come up with a problem statement. Independent oversight and that kind of forced transparency, real time on a regular basis is essential to moving the Bureau of Prisons forward and any agency forward.
Well, I appreciate your input and your support for the legislation as well. And I want to talk a little bit about the impact of understaffing on some of these specific safety issues. I led a PSI investigation a couple years ago, found that female inmates in more than 2/3 of federal prisons that housed female inmates had faced sexual abuse from BOP employees. How do chronic understaffing issues lead to a higher incidence of abuse? And again, just to clarify, make sure I presented the statistic correctly, in 2/3 of federal prisons that housed female inmates faced sexual abuse from BOP employees. How is this linked to understaffing?
Yeah, I think assault by a staff member, assault by another incarcerated person, name any bad event, and the very essence of stopping bad events is supervision. And you design facilities and you design them with a staffing plan. And so when you have half the people to do that staffing plan and you have let's say you have 100 housing units and you have 50 people to cover them, there's no one on those housing units. And at some point, the human beings on those housing units who are locked in cells have to come out of those cells. They have to be fed. They have to get medication. There's a series of things that happen. Without people, it doesn't happen. And so when you get people out and there's nobody there, there may be some folks who are among them who want to do harm to them. So it undermines supervision, and these staffing shortages filter the whole way up. One of the things that I think is a really good illustration for you of how staffing impacts other things is we heard about BOP issuing a memo about something. I forget what it was, but the memo was issued from the director, and this is pre-Collette, and you observed at the IG observed at several prisons that it wasn't happening, right? That communication has to happen through people. You're talking about a 40% vacancy rate. These guys need roller skates. I mean, if you've done just a round in a federal prison, right? You think you can just walk through and not get stopped by someone, or if something's going on? It's wide open for what can happen when you have half the people you need. There's no kiosks in corrections. It doesn't work like that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wetzel, and thank you. And one thing that's become very clear to me through the oversight that I've worked on these issues is a shocking statistic like that. It's not an indictment of the overall BOP workforce. The overwhelming majority of correctional officers are hardworking public servants who try to do the right thing every day. Failures by management, failures at headquarters, failures at high levels of the federal government have put these teams in impossible circumstances. And the Federal Prison Oversight Act, a bipartisan bill with strong support across the board, is vital to addressing these issues. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff, for your not just questions in this hearing, but for your work